Since 2010, there have been 12 new streetcar systems built in cities across the United States. During the same time frame, just 12 new subway stations were opened. These new streetcar systems are an average of just 3 miles long and serve an average of 2,300 riders every day. Why did we build so many systems that are so small and serve so few riders? Additionally, there's only 2 more of these streetcar systems that are under construction and going to be opened in the next decade. So why did we go from building so many of these so quickly to building so few? Was it just a nostalgia bubble that's finally burst? I mean, if it was, I would understand. I love streetcars. I really, really love streetcars. But nostalgia only played a really small role in what is a multitude of reasons for this trend that occurred over the last decade.
The modern streetcar era began in Portland in 2001 when a 2.5-mile long streetcar loop running north-south through the downtown and nearby neighborhoods opened. This system served as the blueprint for a lot of following streetcar systems, although it's different and it's not exactly a part of the generation that we're discussing. It's more of a precursor. The Portland streetcar is much larger than all of its successors. It's been expanded multiple times since it opened, and it has higher ridership than the next 3 busiest systems combined. And that's something we're going to see a lot when we're looking at categories of transit system, is that often there's just one example that works absolutely amazingly and blows all the others out of the water. The most prominent example of that is definitely in pre-war subways, where there's the New York City subway, and then there's the Chicago, Philly, and Boston subways all built at the same time. So that means in this comparison, if Portland is the New York of modern streetcar systems, then the Portland streetcar north-south line, the original line, is like the Lexington Avenue line of streetcars. So anyway, the point I was making, for streetcars, Portland is a pretty big outlier. The system is huge and it has good ridership, and no other streetcar built since has matched it. Portland was built mostly without using federal money. It used local and state funds along with public-private partnership deals, and other streetcars built around the same time, like Seattle, had similar funding setups. The Bush administration preferred funding for bus rapid transit projects, and that made securing funds for streetcars difficult. In 2009, the Obama administration changed this, inspired by the success of the Portland streetcar. Federal money began being directed to streetcar projects in the form of grants given through the Small Starts and New Starts programs. These programs were designed to give funding of less than $100 million to transit projects that needed less than $300 million in total funding. Small streetcar systems were ideal for this type of funding. Pretty much the entire line could be built for less than $300 million. There are 2 reasons why the Obama administration pursued streetcar systems so vigorously: manufacturing and real estate development. Streetcar systems were a way to help shore up manufacturing during the recession. Earlier streetcar systems had looked to foreign manufacturers for their streetcars, but with new legislation and Buy America requirements that were tied to federal funding, it was nearly impossible to buy from any manufacturer besides 2 American companies, United Streetcar and Brookville Equipment Corporation. How did this turn out? Well, United Streetcar struggled to deliver vehicles on time, and when the company finally dissolved in 2015, a lot of cities were left with orphaned streetcars. Brookville was more successful. Their Liberty streetcar model is actually quite innovative, and it was one of the first battery hybrid streetcars. The battery hybrid was developed to cater to American cities specifically. A lot of cities during this time felt it was too difficult and expensive to put overhead wire along their entire streetcar route, So with Brookville's Liberty model, cities like Detroit run their streetcars 60% off the wire using battery alone. The second component of the streetcar push was that streetcars were viewed as a way to revitalize inner cities through real estate development. At the onset of the recession, mid-sized cities in America were in pretty bad shape. In the 2000s, most downtowns were just empty canyons of parking and office fortresses populated by 9 to 5 commuters. Residential housing had been gutted since the mid-century, and areas adjacent to downtowns were filled with vacant lots, surface parking, and decaying buildings. Streetcar circulators were a way to attract new investment, encourage redevelopment, and give a sense of place that many American cities had lost. Streetcars hold a significant space in our cultural memory. Their demise is recent enough that a lot of people in their 60s and older can remember riding a streetcar in their youth. The following generation grew up with Mr. Rogers, where every episode a trolley would take children to the neighborhood of make-believe. Streetcars are quiet and quaint, and we still love them enough that most cities have at least one circulator bus for tourists that's decked out to look like a macabre Franken trolley. Building new track and streetcar stops in an up-and-coming part of town is a sign from the city to developers that this neighborhood is receiving attention and the city's committed to it. Even if the streetcar is not particularly useful, and even if it's possible the line could be deactivated, people view them with a sense of permanence that they just don't give to a local bus, even if it runs along the same route as a streetcar that it replaced decades before. It's the year of our Lord 2018, and the city of Washburn has just finished its inaugural year of a new streetcar operation. Washburn Streetcar is 2-ish miles long. It's a route that runs in roughly a north-south loop and costing about $45 million a mile. The total cost of this new line is around $90 million. What did this buy our city? Well, to start, a maintenance facility was built to service the city's streetcar fleet. This cost about $11 million. The facility was built on a surface parking lot underneath the elevated highway. Our streetcar fleet can be stored and maintained here. It's a lot of infrastructure to build, though, just to handle a small fleet. And if Washburn had an existing light rail system, we might have been able to save some money by just connecting the streetcar track to the light rail facilities and doing our maintenance there. Washburn bought a fleet of streetcars to run on the line for $18 million, which includes 4 streetcars and some spare parts. The city's Skylines workshop doesn't have any streetcars from American manufacturers, so Washburn acquired new Urbos 3 low-floor streetcars built by Spanish manufacturer CAF through an American subsidiary in Elmira, New York. There's a good description of how buying and building rail vehicles through foreign manufacturers works at the end of a video by Do Not Eat about the Bud Company. So the remaining $60 or so million paid for the track, stations, overhead wire, and other costs along the route. Our route runs mostly in a one-way counterclockwise loop with a small bi-directional area where the streetcars can go both north up the loop and south down through the loop. On the south end of the route, the streetcar stop is adjacent to Washburn's bus station for local and intercity buses and is also next to the hockey arena. This is the most useful transit connection on the route. Bus riders can transfer and ride to their destination in the downtown. There really aren't many other significant transit connections in the system. The Amtrak station is entirely missed. It is outside the downtown, and the airport is so far out there, it's not even a consideration. This is one of the busiest stops in the system, with the connections from the bus station and events at the hockey arena. It gets a lot more ridership than some of the stations farther up the route. So from here, the streetcar goes north up the loop through the downtown toward the state capitol building, making stops every few blocks through an area that has experienced a lot of new development recently. Then at the plaza next to the capitol is one of our few bi-directional stops. This one's a little bit weird. The northbound and southbound sides don't share a platform. They are adjacent to each other on different corners of the street. Following this stop is another bi-directional stop that's outside of the city municipal complex. So this is another pretty significant stop. It has the most infrastructure really out of all of them. The next stops are in central neighborhoods with new development. There's a stop near a historic district that's now a nightlife destination, the kind of place that shows up on listicles about bar hopping on the streetcar, and then a science center. Quick aside, why does every city seem to have a hands-on science learning center thing somewhere in its downtown? Well, surprise, it's another revitalization project that cities use to try and stage a massive turnaround of their downtown with one big new thing instead of, I don't know, long-term investment in urban housing and creating livable neighborhoods. Anyway, City Lab just wrote a good article about this, and it's down in the description if you want to check it out. So new developments have gone up adjacent to the streetcar stops, although they still have mandatory parking minimums, and most residents have a car, so their use of the streetcar isn't particularly high. It could be useful for residents, but they're already well served by buses, they have cars, and it's just a really walkable area, so it doesn't make a lot of sense to ride the streetcar when there are more convenient options. Then finally, the streetcar goes back into the office district and goes down Washburn's Broad Street. This is a series of stops that would be useful for commuters to the offices, except that commuters largely live outside of the downtown and drive in. So the streetcar is so far from them that it offers no advantage compared to driving. Then finally, before the streetcar completes its loop, there's a stop outside one of the larger hotels, which makes the streetcar convenient for tourists. It hits a lot of destinations that out-of-towners may want to go to, but it misses what would be useful for residents. Circular routes that most modern streetcar loops utilize are one of those things that new City Skylines players do when they start playing, but quickly find out they shouldn't after they get on Reddit and ask some questions. For an overview on the topic, transit consultant Jarrett Walker has written a few pieces on his blog, Human Transit. Basically, they don't provide direct routes to destinations, and by traveling only in one direction, if you're making a return trip, at least one leg of the trip is going to be unnecessarily long. Despite this, modern streetcars have repeatedly been built in the form of loops. They make long, complicated trips through downtowns trying to maximize the number of destinations that they touch. In this, they mimic the people movers of the 1980s that ringed urban areas and tried to reach destinations like convention centers and hotels to appeal to visitors. Yet, our modern streetcars have lower ridership than the people movers that were largely written off as failures. While people movers also add inconvenient one-way loops, their ridership is better because they also have high-frequency service. Trains show up generally every 3 to 5 minutes, and they run on elevated guideways free of traffic, the opposite of our slow streetcars running down the middle of the street. Streetcars that were built in more direct routes fared better than their circuitous brethren. Kansas City streetcar is a simple north-south line. At the south end is the city's Amtrak station, a medical center, shopping center, museum, and a large office for the IRS. The line traverses the entire downtown and ends up just north of it in a trendy neighborhood. This streetcar is generally considered to be a success. It has 6,500 daily riders, and this success can be owed in part to its direct routing between useful major destinations. Most of the streetcar systems that I researched have fairly long headways, between 10 and 20 minutes depending on the time of day. It's hard to justify waiting this long for a streetcar that moves slowly through mixed traffic on a small route. The Atlanta streetcar is a particularly bad example of this. Between the two most distant stations, Centennial Olympic Park and King Historic District, it's a 14-minute ride on the streetcar. The streetcar runs with 15-minute headways, and so with an average wait time of 7.5 minutes, our trip is now about 21 minutes long. In comparison, it's just over a mile between the stations, and according to Google Maps, it can be done in about 25 minutes. Walking to a station, purchasing a fare, and waiting on a streetcar doesn't make much sense for these short distances. One incentive that streetcars do have is that many of them have very low or free fares. Those that do charge a fare generally range between $1 and whatever the standard fare for the city is. Streetcars were often launched with free fares as a way to build strong ridership, and despite this, some lines still struggled to meet projected ridership. When Dallas implemented a $1 fare to its previously free streetcar line, officials projected the line's ridership would shrink from 415 daily riders to just 360. There's another layer of complication to fares on streetcars. Many of the modern lines opened in the past 10 years have not been a part of their city's regional transit agency. Many of them are built and run by the cities independently, although they may be operated by the transit agency under contract or supervised by them. Being outside of the regional transit agency, streetcars often have their own fare structure, separate ticketing, and no transfers between buses or other rail lines in the city. Transit connections build off of each other to boost ridership, and if riders can't transfer from their bus to the streetcar, then the streetcar has effectively failed to serve as an urban circulator. The transit connections themselves are a mixed bag with modern streetcar systems. Obviously, big ticket items like the airport are missed entirely. Streetcars don't leave downtowns at all. For other connections, some cities did it better than others. Tucson has a streetcar stop next to its Amtrak station and bus station, and in Salt Lake City, the S line acts like a feeder into the larger light rail system. These are solid connections that help integrate the streetcar into the rest of the city's transit. Now, some of the less good examples. The Atlanta streetcar's single connection to MARTA Rail is at Peachtree Center Station, which is okay, except that it's one stop and just a few blocks from 5 Point Station, where all MARTA lines meet, and has about 3 times as much ridership as Peachtree Center. In Cincinnati, the streetcar connects to nothing, absolutely nothing. And in DC, the streetcar comes close to Union Station, but it drops you off on the road behind the station where you have to cross 4 lanes of traffic and enter the station through a parking deck. Where I think streetcars fall really short is in bus connections. Almost every city that built a streetcar line after 2010 had mostly only buses as transit until then. Buses weren't considered in the planning process, and it shows. The routes often weren't updated to reflect the new streetcar. DC's H Street line, the streetcar runs alongside 2 high-frequency buses that share the route. Their stops are right next to each other. This is true for a lot of routes. The buses may come close to the streetcar, but they won't share a stop with it, and so the integration is pretty poor. And it's an American trait to treat rail and bus networks as entirely separate entities instead of building off of each other. In 2016, I visited Amsterdam. One thing that struck me when using trams in Amsterdam was how often buses would pull up to the tram stops. There was no difference in boarding a tram or a bus, and utilizing the tram infrastructure made the bus a better experience. To date, I haven't seen anything like this in the US, except for trying to take trolleys in Philly and discovering that the trolley had been replaced with a bus. I've made a lot of negative points about streetcars in this episode. Before I rest my case and the streetcar stands and the jury send me to transit jail for being a neocon bus fangirl, I do have some positive points to make. One area I feel like streetcars excel is in accessibility. Streetcars are inherently more accessible than buses. They have low floors and level boarding platforms. Additionally, streetcars can be equipped with ramps deployed by riders pressing a button for boarding. Large entry doors and wide bodies make streetcars easier to navigate in a wheelchair, and the stability of riding on rails means that people using wheelchairs don't have to be secured by a driver before moving. Smooth changes in speed and low body roll make it easier for older people to stand up as well. There is an exception to this, though. Cities that don't buy new and instead restore old vehicles don't benefit from the accessibility of modern low-floor streetcars. In El Paso, wheelchair users have to use a lift retrofitted onto vintage high-floor PCC streetcars. If you work for a city and you want advice on buying your next fleet of streetcars, just save your consultant dollars. A D-list train girl on YouTube has your answer. Stop buying refurbished vintage streetcars or any that requires wheelchair users to board with a lift. I know it's less cool, and I wish we had more PCCs around too, but just make life easier and let people in wheelchairs board without a lift. Another area that I think modern streetcars have had success is in creating a safe and comfortable experience. I've said it a couple times, but streetcar stops generally have more infrastructure than a bus stop. There's usually a low platform, a shelter, lighting, ticket vending machines, and sometimes countdown clocks for when the next train arrives. In comparison, a bus stop is lucky if there's a bench and a sign. It's so bad that an annual Sorriest Bus Stop competition is held by Streets blog. Usually a pitiful bus stop on the side of a highway overlooking a cliff wins, or loses, and the city that it's in concedes and installs a bench or something. Having a comfortable place to wait, lighting at night, and reassurance that your train is actually coming makes riding a much more attractive experience than hopping on your local bus. There's no reason a local bus couldn't have the same amenities, though. But to American cities, buses are a second-class transit system reserved for poor people who are forced to ride regardless of how much abuse they have to endure to do so. This part was going to be done by Javier. He's a lot more knowledgeable than I am on city planning and development, but right now he's working on a really cool script for a future episode on legacy streetcar networks, so I'm going to try and handle this as best as I can. You only need to read a little bit of streetcar discourse to quickly see the remarks in the comment section that whatever city's new streetcar is really just for attracting real estate development. And this is true. Many projects list real estate development as a goal for their streetcar. After opening the line, a city official will declare it a success, citing a dollar figure on how much new development has been built around it. These success stories can be a little murky, though. In Atlanta, analysis of development surrounding the streetcar found that some of the development included in the official figures predated the streetcar or hadn't even considered it at all when planning. So, did streetcars boost these neighborhoods, or did cities just put them down in neighborhoods that were already increasing in value? Cities generally branded development adjacent to streetcars as transit-oriented development, the idea being that new residents would boost streetcar ridership. You know, the ridership isn't great right now, but after all these new apartments are built and folks move in, it'll get so much better. But the routes don't really do much for new residents, and the ridership shows. As I pointed out in Washburn, if new development still has parking minimums, and it's inhabited by wealthy residents with cars, they're not going to utilize transit. In terms of transit equity, I would have to rate streetcar loops fairly low. They're disproportionately placed in areas that are already walkable and served by transit, while ignoring poorer neighborhoods on the periphery of the city. For residents of these neighborhoods, there's not much tangible benefit to having a streetcar loop a few miles away that goes to job centers for white-collar office workers. It's hard to quantify exactly how streetcars and gentrification relate. A study from 2018 that I read tried to measure indicators of population change in neighborhoods around new streetcar stops in 4 cities. The results were inconclusive, but they noted that the studied areas did behave differently than control areas, that jobs increased in proximity to the stops and that the population change was statistically different from the rest of the metropolitan area. Some of the hints of gentrification that they found were increases in white and Asian population relative to other groups and increases at the upper end of the educational attainment and household income spectra. This finding was true in Seattle, and in Portland the authors found that while jobs increased near the stops, population decreased. The study ended by stating that it was too early to tell if the streetcars were causing gentrification or that gentrification was already occurring. If streetcars are the driver of gentrification, then on top of their low utility for cities, they could be actively harmful to some residents and put them at risk of being forced out of their neighborhoods. You know, it's interesting that streetcars were chosen as the modern method for real estate development in cities. It's not a new idea to drive development with streetcars. Back in the day, developers would buy chunks of empty land adjacent to cities, plan a new suburb, and an accompanying streetcar line to the downtown, then reap their profits selling plots of land and houses after the line was built. Our modern streetcars are obviously different, and they're built by public entities rather than private developers. But it does raise some concern. After the decline of streetcars, many neighborhoods that formed around them became dependent on cars, and a lot of those neighborhoods entered into decline around the same time. Our modern streetcars are not necessarily more resilient to closure than their predecessors. Between the time I started writing this video and when it's released, the loop trolley in St. Louis ceased operations after less than a year in service. It was only 2 miles long and it ran historic-styled streetcars. The route was part of a plan to boost the gentrifying Del Mar Loop neighborhood, itself a streetcar suburb named for a loop that streetcars would turn around at in the early 20th century. The decline of neighborhoods is not explicitly linked to streetcars. There are many more complex dynamics at play. Redlining, white flight, and federal policy favoring suburban development all played larger roles, but losing the transit that a neighborhood was built around had to have been a loss. If we build new neighborhoods around streetcar loops, what is going to happen to them when some of these streetcars inevitably cease operations? Alright, that's a wrap on that one. I hope you gained a little insight into the streetcar trend and that you take away some information you can use in building your own development-oriented circulators. The next episode is going to be about the metro systems built in the Great Society era. Washburn is going to get a shiny new vintage 1975 subway, and we're going to check out how well it serves the city. I'm not sure how long it's going to take. I've done most of the building for it, but I have a lot left to write, so it could be up to a month. Until then, follow me on Twitter at BigMoodEnergy. Like, subscribe, comment, share, and thanks for watching.